Welcome to Life Stories, where we bring you heartfelt tales of resilience, love, and second chances. In today's story, a woman leaves everything behind for the promise of companionship, only to be rejected for being too old. But fate has other plans. What begins as heartbreak soon transforms into a journey of quiet strength, dignity, and unexpected love. If you've ever wondered whether it's too late to be seen, to be chosen, or to start again, this story is for you. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell, and let's begin today's journey with Life Stories. The train hissed like a great metal beast, steam curling into the cold Wyoming air like restless ghosts. I stepped down from the last car, my gloved hand gripping the worn leather handle of my carpet bag. I had worn my best blue dress, though time and countless washings had faded it to something less than its former glory. The lace at the cuffs was delicate still, though threadbare in places. As the hem brushed against the dust of the Red Bluff station platform, I hardly noticed. My eyes were fixed on the road ahead, the future I had come here chasing. In the pocket of my coat was a letter, folded so many times the creases had worn thin. I touched it now, trembling fingers brushing the inked words that had changed everything. Walter Briggs, a widower rancher, had written to me after seeing my advertisement in the matrimonial classifieds. His words had been warm, kind, laced with a sense of longing that mirrored my own. He needed a companion, he'd said. Someone to keep house, to offer steady support, maybe even to share laughter again. I cried when I first read it. At 52, I didn't expect a man to write me with such tenderness ever again. I adjusted my hat, wide-brimmed and stiff with the grime of travel, and took in the scene before me. Red Bluff was rough around the edges. 2 saloons, a church, a dry goods store with a crooked sign, and dust. Dust on everything. There was no welcoming committee, no eager face waiting for me. I stood there, the only passenger left, as the train exhaled its last gust of steam and rattled away down the tracks. I felt exposed in the open, like something fragile left out in the sun too long. A group of young men lounged on the porch of the saloon nearby, watching me with smirks and whispering to each other. Their eyes made my skin prickle. I stiffened my back, refusing to let them see how unsettled I felt. "Margaret Lane?" The voice came from behind, rough and unfamiliar. I turned quickly, heart leaping with relief and something like hope. It was him, Walter. He was taller than I imagined from his letters, with sun-bronzed skin, sandy hair, and a thick mustache curled at the ends. His boots were scuffed, his coat travel-worn, and a revolver hung at his hip. He looked like he belonged to the land, solid and respectable. But the moment our eyes met, something changed. His gaze swept over me, slow and heavy, pausing at the gray in my hair, the way my back stooped slightly from years of sewing and nursing. His expression darkened. "I thought you'd be younger," he said, blunt as a slap. I opened my mouth to reply, stunned. "You never asked my age," I said softly. "Didn't think I had to," he muttered, barely meeting my eye. "Figured that was Miss Spring in the photo." My cheeks burned. "You wrote me, Mr. Briggs. You said—" "I know what I said," he interrupted, voice sharpening. "But I wasn't expecting a woman who's past childbearing years. I thought you wanted companionship. Someone steady. I've been both." He gave a dry, humorless laugh. "Steady's fine, but I wanted someone to give me sons, not someone done with that kind of life." His words landed hard. Behind me, I heard laughter from the saloon, young men amused at the scene unfolding. Walter straightened his coat, trying to look civil, but his voice was final. "I ain't one to humiliate a lady, but I can't marry you. It just wouldn't work." "You already have," I said, my voice small. "You humiliated me." He looked away, tipped his hat awkwardly. "I'll pay for your train ride back east." I stared at him, stunned. "I sold everything I had to get here," I said, my voice cracking. But he was already turning away. The platform emptied, and the weight of every year I had lived settled on my shoulders like a stone cloak. One of the boys called out, "Need help carrying that bag, ma'am?" Followed by another round of laughter. I gripped the carpet bag tighter and walked. Nowhere in particular, just away. My spine straight, my jaw clenched, ignoring the tears stinging my eyes. By sundown, my boots were caked in dust, my stomach hollow and aching. I hadn't eaten since sunrise. I wandered to the edge of town, trying to find a quiet place to sit and think. My trunk, the little I still owned in this world, was gone, left at the station, and likely taken when I stepped off to find Walter. I finally sank down beside a dry creek bed, staring into the wide, empty horizon. Coyotes howled in the distance. The wind teased the loose strands of silver blonde hair around my ears. I had been many things: a wife once, a mother briefly, a seamstress, a nurse to my neighbors. But this was new. A lifetime of quiet obedience, of doing what was right, had led me to a cracked patch of earth under a darkening sky in a town that did not want me. I should have stayed home, I thought. Let myself fade like so many other forgotten women. Then, far off, lightning cracked. Thunder followed, low and distant. I needed shelter. My pride had already taken enough of a beating. I stood, knees aching, and began walking toward the soft flicker of light from a distant cabin, just beyond the edge of town. I didn't know it then, but I wasn't walking away from the end of my story. I was walking toward its true beginning. The wind picked up as I crossed the open stretch of land, tugging at my coat and hat like it was trying to pull me backward. The storm hadn't fully broken yet, but the sky churned above me, dark, rolling clouds like ink spilled across the heavens. I was cold, tired, and heartsick, but something about that small flicker of lantern light in the distance kept my legs moving. I hadn't gone far when a voice drifted out of the shadows. "You lost, ma'am?" I froze, hand tightening around the handle of my bag. A man on horseback stepped out from a grove of cottonwoods. The light from the lantern hanging by his saddle danced across his face, lean, weathered, maybe mid-50s. He wore a dark trail coat, dusty from the road, and a rifle slung over his back. He didn't look dangerous, but I had learned not to trust appearances. "I don't take kindly to folks sneaking up," I said, trying to sound stronger than I felt. "Didn't mean to sneak," he replied calmly. "Just figured it's no place to be walking alone after dark. Name's Henry Callahan. My cabin's just yonder. Got food, a fire. You look like you could use both." I hesitated. The old me, the quiet, cautious woman who never stepped outside her lines, would have declined. But I wasn't her anymore. Not after what happened on that platform. "I'm not looking for favors," I said. "I'm not offering any," he answered gently. "Just a warm place and a seat by the fire. No strings." And so I took his hand. The ride was silent, save for the wind and the steady rhythm of hooves on dirt. His cabin came into view just as the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. Modest, built from rough timber and stone, with light glowing through oiled windows. Inside, it smelled of wood smoke and rabbit stew. The warmth hit me like a wave, sinking into my bones. "You sit," he said, pulling a chair near the fire. "I'll get you a blanket." I sank into the seat, my whole body aching from more than just the journey. Henry handed me a mug of coffee, strong, bitter, and real. "You're not from around here," he said after a while. "No," I said, then paused. "I was meant to be, but the man who brought me here changed his mind." He didn't ask why. I appreciated that. "I'm 52, I added, just to be plain. He didn't flinch. I wasn't wondering. That silence between us, so different from the ones I'd known, felt earned, like two people who'd carried too much for too long and suddenly found someone who understood the weight. Henry spoke of his wife, gone 5 years now from fever. I spoke of my son, lost at just 2 summers. And somehow we didn't break in the telling. We stitched the pieces of grief into something like companionship, maybe even a fragile kind of peace. As the storm raged outside, Henry placed another log on the fire. I leaned back in the chair, the quilt pulled tight around my shoulders, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't just surviving. I was beginning to feel seen. I woke to the scent of damp earth and ashes, the fire barely clinging to warmth. The storm had passed, but its memory still whispered through the cracks in the cabin walls. I stirred slowly, quilt wrapped around my shoulders, eyes finding Henry already awake, sitting at the table with a tin mug of coffee and his rifle within reach. There was something comforting about the way he sat there. Quiet, alert, present. But we weren't alone. Near the door, still wrapped in a borrowed blanket, lay a man named Ray Dillon, a stranger who'd arrived soaked and breathless the night before. Said his horse had gone lame and he'd been walking through the storm. Henry hadn't trusted him from the first knock, and neither had I. Still, we let him in. The West doesn't turn away the cold and desperate, even when your gut tells you to. Ray stirred, stretched, and sat up, too smooth for a man who'd supposedly just survived a thunderstorm. His eyes flicked between us, calculating. "Appreciate the shelter," he said, voice rough with feigned gratitude. "Most folks out this way ain't so generous." Henry didn't respond, just watched him. "You two married?" Ray asked, sipping the coffee I'd handed him. Henry answered before I could. "No." Ray's gaze lingered too long. "Could have fooled me. You take care of each other like it's been years." I didn't blink. "We take care of ourselves." Ray chuckled, but the tension in the room coiled tight. He claimed his horse broke its leg. Henry calmly pointed out there were no fresh tracks in the mud, no saddle, no gear, and his shirt was dry despite the storm. Ray's smile faltered. "I'm no threat," he said. Henry stood, slow and deliberate. "Then keep your hands where I can see them." But Ray lunged, going for the rifle. It happened fast, too fast for fear to catch up. The chair scraped, the two men grappling, and I moved without thinking. My hand flew to the cabinet where Henry kept his spare revolver. I cocked it and stepped forward. "Let go," I said, steady and cold. Ray froze. His hand still on the barrel, eyes wide as I held the gun trained on his chest. I said, "Let go." He obeyed. Henry stepped back and raised the rifle. "Out," he growled. "I got nowhere to go," Ray spat. "That's not our problem," I said. "You walked in lying. That's enough." Something in our eyes must have convinced him, because Ray cursed under his breath and backed out into the gray morning. The door slammed. Silence fell. My hands trembled as I set the revolver down. Henry looked at me, quiet admiration in his eyes. "You've got more grit than most men I've met." I took a breath. Being treated like I'm fragile for 50 years will do that to a woman. We didn't speak again for a while, just sat together, sipping coffee, listening to the stillness. The storm outside was over, but something new was just beginning. Not loud, not sudden, just steady and real. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the Wyoming hills, I stood with Henry on the ridge overlooking Red Bluff. The sky was painted in soft shades of violet and gold, and for the first time in years, I wasn't looking back. I was looking forward. 2 days had passed since Ray Dillon vanished into the wilderness, and since Walter Briggs came crawling back, license in hand, full of regret. He thought he could take back his rejection, that I'd be grateful for a second chance. But I'd already chosen. I had chosen myself. I had chosen Henry, not because he promised me anything grand, but because he saw me as I was and found worth in it. Later that night, Henry gave me something small, his late wife's ribbon. Frayed at the edges, soft from wear, it meant something. He wasn't asking me to replace her. He was offering a place beside him, a life with warmth, with fire, with truth. I tied that ribbon around my wrist as we walked back toward the cabin, hand in hand, beneath a sky dusted with stars. Maybe love doesn't always arrive in our youth with fireworks and grand declarations. Maybe sometimes it finds us later, quieter, deeper, shaped by all we've lost and all we still hope for. I was never too old. I was just waiting for a man who wasn't afraid of a woman with a spine, a story, and a little gray in her hair. If you've ever felt forgotten, overlooked, or told you're too late, remember this. Some stories don't bloom until late spring, but when they do, they bloom brighter. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to catch the next video from Life Stories, where true love, second chances, and unforgettable journeys come to life.